Hi, Sue. Thank you so much for joining us. Sue, can you just tell us who you are and a little bit about your social value journey, please?
Hi Rosie, thanks for having me. I'm Su Pickerill, I'm the Head of Social Value at Wates Group. We're a construction and property services business, been running for over 126 years, and we work nationwide across the UK.
Brilliant. So can you tell me a bit about social value at Wates and how that's developed, perhaps a little bit about the early days?
So I think social value has always been really important to Wates. Being a family-owned business, it's really embedded in what we do. I think since the Social Value Act, it's probably become a bit more formalised. When I joined Wates over 8 years ago, we were a central team of about 5, so maybe sort of 5 to 10 people looking at social value. We're now nearly a 50-strong team across the business. So I think that gives you a sense of how much the company has recognised the importance and the developing importance of social value over the years, how important it is to our clients and how central it is to our contracts, and how much we need to be really putting it front and centre in our work rather than something that's nice to do on the side but actually doesn't have a real purpose within the business. I think that's really changed. It's become much more of a requirement for the business to be delivering social value, as well as something that we want to do because it's the right thing to do.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because actually it's the mindset shift that's the most important thing, and then putting those resources in place and building out that team, as well as the kind of education across the board. So that's really important. What would you say to construction firms who are perhaps kind of earlier in that journey? What kind of advice would you give, and what would you say? Is there a step-by-step kind of guide?
I think in terms of the impact for social value, we know that some of the biggest ways that we can deliver that as a sector are through jobs and training and through how we procure. So in some ways they're quite simple things to look at, and I would say that is where I would start. Traditionally, people might have looked at things like volunteering, and those things are great as well. And perhaps in the volunteering side, we can shift from general volunteering to more skills-based volunteering, and how can we be more purposeful in that. But I think the biggest impact that we can have is through who we employ, both directly and through our supply chain, and how we can upskill those people, and perhaps attracting people from furthest from the workforce groups that we might not have considered so much before, and really make more of an effort to bring them into the business. Perhaps people that have been in prison, for example, people with criminal records, perhaps care leavers, people that are leaving the military. So we can look at how we do that, and then the training side, so in terms of apprenticeships or T-levels, how we support people to upskill and be able to improve their job opportunities and their career path.
I'd love to talk about those a little bit more. So let's start with the volunteering. At Miss Macaroon, we have benefited from some incredible volunteers, and we've also set up kind of volunteering days that have been a huge drain on our resources and provided absolutely no value whatsoever. And that is something that I hear a lot with charities and social enterprises. So, for yourselves, for other construction companies listening, what kind of advice would you give so that you are ensuring that your volunteering activities are providing value for yourselves, because that's just equally as important, but also kind of acknowledging the resource requirement from the third sector organisations, and actually providing value for the end beneficiaries that we're all kind of here to support?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I think that if I look back at our journey with social enterprises, for example, we used to run tours where we used to go and visit a number of social enterprises and bring colleagues and clients, and that was something that we got great feedback of. Everybody really enjoyed that, and it was quite impactful in terms of seeing what was going on. I think there's real value in that, but the feedback that we got from the social enterprises was, as you said, that it was actually quite a lot of work and effort for them to host those people, and wasn't always translating into increased business for them or the opportunities that we'd hoped would have the door opened as a result of those visits. And so we actually pivoted what we do, and now we've set up 4 years ago, we set up the Assets programme, which is focused more on mentoring social enterprises to build their capacity. So it's much more focused on understanding their growth trajectory and how we can support, and being much more specific in the professional skills and advice that we can bring to those organisations through mentoring, through expert-led workshops. And we work with the Impact Hub to deliver that programme. And we've also brought in Travis Perkins, who's part of our supply chain, as a partner in that programme, so that we can provide more specific support that hopefully is adding greater value.
That's amazing, because you've got all of the really important factors that you need for a volunteering programme that works well, because it's focused on the needs of the third sector organisations to help them to grow so that they can do more good work. But also it's using all of your skills that you have, rather than, you know, obviously you're a construction firm, so probably a lot of you can come and paint a fence or clear a garden, but actually, you know, it's the real in-depth skills of the business support and the marketing and the operational capacity and the efficiencies that's you really actually delivering the very, probably expensive for you, and hugely impactful kind of knowledge that is required. And I think I can see how on both sides that would be a really beneficial piece of volunteering. And I think those are some of the key things that other organisations need to really think about. And the press shots are all really good, and you can get those from those kind of impactful programmes just as much as you can from a garden clear. But the long-term impact is completely different. So great that you've made those changes. I'm really pleased to hear that.
I think there is room for both. So we do still do some of the garden clear and sort of bringing those skills. And lots of people want to engage. I think one of the things to recognise is that our colleagues like to volunteer in different ways as well and bring different things. And that sometimes those traditional kind of, you know, fit out type jobs, there is a role for those as well, where we can leverage our supply chain, perhaps bring in materials and skills. So where we can bring value to that, then I think there's definitely still a role for that. And it also does help to build relationships. So I think, you know, there's still room for both, but I think that it's important to recognise like you say, the value of the professional skills volunteering, which I think, talking to colleagues, we don't always recognise as being as valuable as they are to the recipients, because we might be doing that sort of thing day in, day out. To us, it doesn't feel like something special, but actually to an organisation, particularly a small organisation where you've got a leadership team that's wearing multiple hats, just having that sort of expert input or sounding board can be really invaluable.
Yeah, and I think the difference there is for you, for your networks, for your suppliers, you are from the construction industry. So actually they are really important skills that you bring, and it's your expertise to come and do that construction work and have that fit out or that clearance. But I think where we're talking about perhaps different sectors, IT, the legal services, different organisations where they're coming to do a similar kind of thing, it's not their expertise area, and actually then they won't be providing a similar kind of value. So in the same way that you do, looking at the actual kind of skills that you have as an organisation and sharing those, I think that's where the real kind of magic happens, definitely. So kind of moving on to the employment opportunities, great to see that as well. Can you talk us a little bit more through perhaps some kind of examples that you've had where that's worked really well?
Yeah, so we have a focus on 6 furthest from the workforce groups, including the ones I mentioned earlier. And so we're really keen to be looking at how we can open doors for people who may not have had exposure to the right sort of information, or their life circumstances may have changed, so they need some additional input. So we've developed, for example, a programme in prisons, which we call Reimagining Talent, where we're talking to people about how to think about employment post-release, and talking to them about things like disclosure and how they talk to a prospective employer about their criminal record. And some of the feedback that we're having is that they're not getting that kind of information at the moment, and that's going to help them to to break down some of the fear barriers that there's no chance once they're released of getting a job, but also how to go about that effectively in terms of what their legal requirements are and how we do that. So supporting people to look at getting jobs through that. We've run programs similarly with care leavers that maybe provide an opportunity to talk to people about employment and routes in and the support that they might need to access opportunities.
Great, that's amazing, isn't it? Because actually, that could be seen as a cost, but it's really about future-proofing the workforce in an area where you need people and you've got that talent there, so why not look in those places and put that extra support? Because I think that's often the conversation that we have, and sometimes organisations get it and sometimes they don't, but so sometimes when they're at the beginning of that journey, they think, right, we're going to make the opportunities available for people, but actually it's that equity that we need to really think about. If somebody is 3 miles away from that door, it's very hard for them to open it. And so actually, what do we need to do for somebody in prison, leaving prison, or a care leaver to help them to get closer to that door so that they can walk through it? And it sounds like you're doing some fantastic work there.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's about looking at processes. We've spent a long time looking at our internal processes through things like how do we change how we advertise, looking at the level of DBS check that might be required for particular roles, for example, and how does that influence our recruitment process? How do we train and upskill both internally and within our supply chain to consider why we might want to be recruiting people with criminal records, and also how to do that effectively, and how to make sure that our procedures support us to do that, and how we think about and work in partnership with prisons to overcome some of the challenges of not being able to access emails, for example, and so how we might consider onboarding people, and those are things that that we're actively working through, and those are ongoing conversations about how we try and break down some of those barriers so that we can open the doors for people, and looking at what those wider needs are and what as a business we can do to support and signpost people.
Amazing. Yeah, it's so important. Can we talk about partnering with voluntary and community enterprises and social enterprises? How's your experience been, and what advice would you give to suppliers who are starting on that journey?
So I think that it's been a positive journey on the whole. It's the social enterprise sector is really diverse. I think one of the things I really love about working with these purpose-driven organisations is that they really are set up to want to make a difference and to want to bring value to our society through how they deliver their business. So working with those organisations provides a real opportunity to drive greater impact, to indirectly support people into work. And I think that one of the things we've recognised is that often organisations are smaller and more regional, so we need to have conversations. Within the construction sector, there are often lots of people within the business who hold the keys to opening trading relationships, for example. So it's often a case of making sure that people understand that there's often more than one person that needs to be spoken to, and as an organisation working with social enterprises, we need to make sure that we explain that if you have one contact in an organisation, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be your sole way in, and that recognise that takes a bit of work. We have some great long-term partnerships with the social enterprise sector. If I think about the likes of Community Wood Recycling, who take surplus timber from sites and then that's either sold or recycled or sort of upcycled into product that might otherwise have gone to waste, and that organisation is working with people who need an opportunity to either volunteer or to work with them, that need a step back into the workforce, and they're able to provide a more supported working environment to help people transition back into the workforce. And that's great. That works really well for us, supporting our sustainability objectives in terms of making sure that there's less going to landfill. but also supporting the people that are working that need those jobs as well.
That's brilliant. Such amazing work. Yeah, so impactful. And how do you create those genuine long-term relationships with third sector organisations? What's important within that process?
I think a lot of it does come down to providing sort of an opportunity to get to know people. We're a founding partner of the Bisocial Corporate Challenge, so we work with Social Enterprise UK. That gives us an opportunity to meet different social enterprises, to get to know other organisations who are working in this space as well. We use something called the Social Partnership Portal, where we can identify social enterprises, and we have about probably 80 or so social enterprises that we work with, that we're aware of, that we've built relationships with over time. So I think it's about understanding who's operating where. Some organisations can operate nationally, some operate regionally, and getting to know those people, those organisations, who their beneficiaries are, what they can and can't do as well, is really important.
Amazing. And what are Wates' plans to bring more charities and social enterprises into the supply chain to win more contracts?
I think with the Procurement Act coming in as well, and the social value model, the emphasis on ensuring that there are opportunities for smaller organisations and social enterprises to access trading opportunities is continuing to be front of mind. So balancing that with the need for efficiency within the supply chain is really important. But also it might be that we need to look at how to bring organisations in, both directly but also through tier 2 supply chain, so that their organisations are coming in. Perhaps we build it into the requirements for our supply chain to then engage where there might be more direct opportunities, perhaps for subsets of work or for particular commission services as part of a wider provision of work. So I think that there are lots of different ways that we need to think about how we engage both directly and indirectly with social enterprises and VCSEs in general.
And what do you think those tier 2 suppliers might need by way of support or resource to enable that to happen?
I think part of it is around awareness and understanding why they would want to do that. Part of it is around understanding who's out there and what the capability is. So there are a few different directories. Social Enterprise UK has one, as I mentioned, Social Partnership Portal, which is a construction-specific directory. So making sure that we raise awareness with our supply chain and our colleagues internally. Our commercial colleagues hold quite a lot of keys on that one in terms of looking at who is available to trade with, what their products or services are, and how we can ensure that we're getting good value as a business, but also additional value through social impact.
Amazing. And what kind of practical steps do you think organisations can take to move that agenda forward, but also kind of make the workforce more inclusive? And do they kind of go hand in hand?
I think inclusion is massively important. For us as a sector, we know that it's something that we need to work on more. We need to be more representative as a sector, and that's through how we recruit people and also what our supply chain is looking like. But I think that the more we do this, the more it's a positive cycle in terms of attracting people and attracting the right supply chain as well. So we can see what's being reflected in terms of people that are applying to work for us, and also how the supply chain is engaging. So I think in terms of identifying opportunities, then we can look at working with partner organisations such as Social Enterprise UK to help identify opportunities. There are different ways to meet social enterprises. I think part of it really is still understanding the sector. I think there are still a lot of people that don't really understand what the social enterprise sector is, how it maybe differs from the charity sector, what social enterprises are all about. I think there's some challenge because there isn't sort of one definition of social enterprises. I think that can be a bit confusing for organisations to understand. Who's in, who's not, how does a social enterprise differ from an organisation that's just doing great work, whether that's environmentally, socially. and what those differences are. So I think there's still a big awareness piece around the social enterprise sector that we can take a part in terms of raising awareness within our supply chain and within our internal colleagues. So we have a network, for example, of social enterprise champions within Wates, and they can speak to their colleagues on projects. They can consider, we have targets around social enterprise spend, and they consider how those targets will break down at project level. So they'll be having those conversations about where would we get social enterprise spend for a particular project, which social enterprises are operating in the vicinity, what products and services do we need to procure for that particular project in that particular area, and who might be able to help us to do that. So we're starting that, and I think the earlier you start that process, the better, really. So doing that at the start of the project is really helpful so that you can bake in who you're going to work with and what value they're going to be able to bring.
Amazing. It's so, so important. I've been hearing that across a lot of the conversations that we've been having, that it can't be a tick box exercise. It's got to be core to the project and to the organisation, and baking it in as early as possible is one of the ways to really help that. So if you were to leave a construction organisation with one key piece of advice to help build their social value work, whether they're kind of starting from scratch or just partway through that journey, what would that one piece of advice be?
I think it's to think about the impact that you can have as a business through skills and procurement. So the jobs that you can offer to people furthest from the workforce, and how you can include social enterprises in particular within your procurement strategy. Those two things will have a big impact. Local supply chain as well, I think, is really important, and making sure that we are considering how to balance the local agenda with efficiencies. But I think that if we're baking in the opportunity to engage with social enterprises, and we're considering how we bring talent in from groups that we might not have considered before, then that'll take us a long way to delivering better businesses.
Amazing. And so for you, what does social value mean to you personally?
For me personally, social value is core to what motivates me as a person. I think that it's how we can make sure that business is leaving a really positive legacy. It's utilising the resources that are available within the private sector to change society for the better. And I think that for me is a really exciting place to work. How can we work together to make sure that how we do business improves lives for everybody, and recognising that not everybody has the same opportunities, and that sometimes we need to reach out a little bit further to people to help them to help us.
That's really interesting, and I'm sure lots of organisations will find that very insightful. I guess on the flip side of the same coin, what are some of the common mistakes or the key areas to avoid for organisations just starting off in social value?
I think when you look at social value, it's such a broad agenda that it's very easy to try and do too much. And I would really encourage organisations to be quite focused in the impact that they want to have, to consider the balance between depth and breadth of engagement. So there's a really positive ripple effect that can happen when we achieve depth. And I think it's easy to try and boil the ocean and do too much. And so I think it's important to understand what difference can we as an organisation make, where can we have the biggest impact, and to be quite focused in how we do that.
Are you able to share an example of where that's really come into its own at Wates, where depth has really made that big difference and created those ripples?
I think if we look at education, we've been running a summer programme for a number of years, I think since 2018. We've had nearly 300 young people go through that programme. So we've been running a week-long residential for up to 30 young people, aged 16 to 18. And the feedback that we've had from that is that they've had a really immersive experience. So rather than having sort of a dip in time, sort of an hour here or there, actually spending that time fully thinking about their own personal potential, as well as understanding about the sector, is really important for them to get a greater understanding of what they can achieve personally, but also a little bit more about the sector. So I think sometimes it's important to think about not just the large numbers, but how we can have a deeper impact with individuals. I think the same goes for employment as well, or for opportunities where we can really look at how we can have a positive impact on individuals. Isn't always about the big numbers. If we look at the work that we're doing in prison with workshops to really change the opportunity for a smaller number of individuals, but to provide a more supported environment for them, to provide the opportunity to learn new skills, to gain access to opportunities that they might not have been able to have, and to do that well for a few number of people is part of what I think is really important.
I absolutely agree. I think we need to move away from measuring just the activities and move to measuring the actual impact.
Definitely.
So, going and speaking to somebody and it really transforming their mindset and therefore their actions, and it changing their trajectory, is completely different to speaking to somebody or a group of 100 people, and it's just something else. It's just something else that kind of prompts them to maybe think but take no action. So I'm a big fan of actually those really in-depth, transformative moments of real change for people, because that's what creates the impact. So yeah, absolutely agree with you there.
Yeah, I think it's about trying to consider, building long-term relationships as well, and how we do that more. I think it's a challenge for the construction sector, where we're often in places for a short amount of time, or a couple of years, and then we move on. Many of our contracts are longer than that, and we have a chance to build longer relationships. And I think it gives you a chance to really develop the impact that you can have over time when you can be more consistent with that relationship.
Definitely. Sue, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you.